Welcome to The Explainer. I'm your host, and as a psychologist who specializes in the trauma behind superhuman abilities, I'm absolutely obsessed with finding cases that show the profound, undeniable connection between the mind and the physical world. And today, today we're looking at a truly fascinating documentary subject, the clinical case study of Brann Ister. Brann's story isn't just your standard tale of a guy with extraordinary abilities. It's a really deep, profound exploration into the psychological burdens of raw power. We're going to see exactly how deep-seated, untreated trauma can literally, and I mean literally, warp the physical environment around someone. Okay, let's dive into this patient file overview. We'll be tracking Brann's journey from his trauma diagnosis all the way to his constructive growth across 6 phases: the anatomy of traumatic awakening, isolation and survival instincts, treatment through naming the burdens, the temptations of absolute justice, the philosophy of restraint, and finally, constructive growth and agency.
Starting with Phase 1, the anatomy of traumatic awakening, where we look at trauma manifesting as actual physical weight.
To really get Brann, we have to understand the environment he grew up in. We're talking about a harsh quarry town, a place completely defined by dust, grit, and exploitation. When the event known as the first scatter of raw powers happened, it didn't enter him through some mystical chanting. It entered him through sheer, crushing physical fatigue. So, the crucial point is, this introduces the clinical concept of burden binding. Brann's power isn't typical magic. It's the psychological translation of raw human trauma and the instinct to endure, manifesting as visible physical weight and pressure in the real world. We see this incredibly vividly during his initial awakening at a collapsed kiln. Picture this. Brann is lifting a cracked beam. He's completely exhausted, lungs burning with the taste of gravel. He exhales just once, and the earth around him literally trembles. The rubble obeyed him simply because his raw power made weight listen. It was this unfiltered, massive release from a human being who had been pushed far beyond ordinary limits.
And the physical manifestations of his internal state, they are undeniable. When Brann experiences physiological stress or tries to suppress a painful memory, the environment physically warps. During one incident at the quarry, a demonic collector was threatening vulnerable workers. As Brann internally tightened up, suppressing his rage, carts began to sink into the hard road as if it were wet clay. When he finally breathed out, solid iron locks burst inward. These are direct visual cues linking his mental suppression to devastating environmental pressure.
Moving into Phase 2, isolation and survival instincts, or what we can call the crushing echo. Like so many trauma survivors, Brann's immediate response was profound distrust. He viewed his abilities purely as a survival mechanism against an exploitative world. But here's the thing. That coping mechanism was highly destructive. Sela Vorn, another awakened human, observed him and accurately diagnosed the problem. She saw the cracks in Brann and realized his raw power didn't just crush his enemies. It was exacting a heavy toll by crushing his own soul first. Every time he forced the world to bear more weight, his own psyche carried the echo of that trauma. Notice the stark philosophical juxtaposition here. Brann's trauma-driven instinct is simply to endure and crush. Because of his past, he inherently distrusts anyone with power. But then we have Ilian Mar, who demonstrated something radical. By making a boulder hum with energy, rather than just breaking it, Ilian showed Brann raw power could actually be guided by restraint. It didn't solely have to be used as a weapon. That brings us to Phase 3, treatment, naming the burdens at Grey Orchard. Recognizing that his current state was completely unsustainable, Brann relocated to Grey Orchard to commence rigorous emotional regulation therapy.
His instinct had always been to hold everything inside until it shattered, but Ilian Mar required the exact opposite. Using a circle of stones, Ilian taught Brann 3 specific therapeutic steps. First, isolate a target stone. Second, name a specific emotional burden. And third, release the pressure into that stone without breaking it. Process the pain precisely before it becomes a destructive force.
This process required Brann to confront what we'd call a clinical trauma inventory. He had to verbally identify and process his childhood memories. He named hunger, betrayal, fear, shame. He named the vivid memory of his mother counting coins by candlelight and the sheer rage of watching strong men exploit the weak. By clinically naming these specific burdens, he removed their volatile subconscious grip on him, essentially preventing his power from exploding indiscriminately. And this brilliantly illustrates his first major breakthrough. Brann was able to make a single fallen apple just heavy enough to crack open, gently releasing the seeds into the mud without destroying them. For the very first time, he used his power not as a punishment, but as a beginning. He successfully turned destructive pressure into constructive growth.
But recovery isn't a straight line. Phase 4, the temptations of absolute justice, brought on by the demon Malgrath.
Brann soon faced a severe risk of relapse. The demon Malgrath acted as a predator, exploiting Brann's exhaustion. Malgrath sent him dreams of a black throne where oppressors and tyrants were pinned beneath mountains, where the victim never has to beg twice. So, what does this all mean? Well, I want to pose this question directly to you. Why would a trauma survivor reject a world of absolute justice? Why turn away from a crown that promises to carry all of your heavy burdens so you can finally just rest?
The answer lies in a profound clinical realization. With Sela Vorn's intervention, Brann saw that beneath his dream throne, right alongside the tyrants, were frightened children and innocent villagers. Treating trauma symptoms through authoritarian absolute control isn't a cure, it's just another trauma response. Absolute pressure cannot distinguish true guilt from ordinary human weakness. Therefore, authoritarian control is a moral failure that inevitably harms the innocent.
So, when Malgrath later offered him a hidden crown, promising simply to take away his pain, Brann explicitly rejected the demonic offer of absolute control. What did he choose instead? Human agency and restraint. In a really powerful moment, he grabs a handful of mud, anchoring himself in reality, and vows never, ever to trade his pain for permission to become cruel.
Let's look at the broader implications in Phase 5. The philosophy of restraint and analyzing the moral risks.
Now, what's really interesting to see here is how different external factions systematically diagnose the moral hazards of burden binding. They all view Brann's psychological progress differently. The angels warned that turning his pain into rigid law would just create another prison. The demons wanted to twist his weight into permanent obedience. And the natural masters? They diagnosed that imposing sheer force ignores the actual living ache of the earth itself.
We see Brann's mastery of restraint beautifully documented during the Battle of the Sinking Road. Actively provoked by Malgrath's forces, Brann could have easily crushed every single one of them. Instead, he made the earth sink to trap them. He pinned their weapons and their chains, not their throats. He actively chose to hold back absolute destruction, proving his therapy held up even under extreme distress. But get this, even after saving the villagers, they recoiled from his power in fear. Brann nearly fled back into isolation. That's when Ilian Mar provided another psychological breakthrough. He told Brann, "If you run because they fear you, you teach them fear was right,
It shifted everything. Brann realized that being feared by others was simply another burden to study. He didn't have to internalize it, he just had to tolerate it without retreating.
Which brings us to the final phase of his profile. Phase 6, constructive growth and agency, becoming the gate bearer. Let's move to and see how this builds into his final integration. Brann studied under Taran Malvar, the master of soil, who made him work a dead field by hand for days. When Brann finally used burden binding again, he didn't command the earth. He simply eased the compacted weight from the soil so living, green roots could breathe and rise. He learned that living systems require patient release, not just sheer domineering force.
This entire character study culminates in the heavy gate of Grey Orchard. Brann didn't forge a weapon, he built a protective threshold. By setting burden binding into the gate, it became light and welcoming for the innocent, but impossibly heavy for anyone carrying malicious intent. The gate symbolizes Brann's full psychological integration. He transformed his deep trauma into a tool that evaluates intention rather than dealing absolute, unyielding judgment.
Brann Ister's clinical profile teaches us that raw power, much like profound trauma, doesn't become safe just by pretending the darkness isn't there. It becomes meaningful through constant, deliberate, conscious agency. And it leaves us with this provocative question to reflect on in our own lives. How do we choose every single day not to let the heavy burdens of our past dictate who we become? Thank you for exploring this remarkable case with me. Keep examining the weights you carry, and we'll see you in the next explainer.